When I was in college, I used to house sit for a family for a few years when they would go on their annual family vacations. I've had a handful of other scary, creepy experiences, but the one I want to talk about today was the one that forced me to quit house sitting for them. I was in my 20s and was trying to make ends meet. House sitting was one of the many side hustles I had. The family would be going on a 2-week vacation abroad and wouldn't have any service. So if anything went wrong, I would have to call the police or their relatives, depending on the situation. Please keep in mind that I had already experienced a few creepy incidents in their house prior to this, but it was never scary enough to deter me, because they paid me very well. I used to work at an animal shelter, so I was well versed in animal care and knew about cat behavior. This family had 4 cats who were all very well behaved. For the first few days, all was well. I slept in the guest bedroom and went to school from their house because they lived close enough that I could just walk to class and didn't have to pay for parking or bring lunch, since I could just go back to their place. Then the issues began. After a few days, my boyfriend at the time came over with dinner to keep me company, as he knew I was always a bit creeped out by the house. We sat in the guest bedroom and watched TV for a few hours, eating until he said he needed to go home. Sometimes he'd sleep over, but he told me on this particular night that he had a strong gut feeling he needed to sleep at home. He urged me to go home because that gut feeling was really bad. At that point, it was around midnight, and to be honest, I didn't want to go home. To put it bluntly, I had a complicated home life and didn't get along with my parents. The only time I got a break from home was the annual house sitting once a year, and I didn't feel like wasting it. My only sibling, who was also my best friend, had moved out due to the toxicity, and honestly, home wasn't home without them anymore. I told him that I'd be fine and that I would lock up after he left. He was still really uneasy and tried to persuade me to go home once again. He tried to explain that while he had slept over before, for some reason, tonight, the house just felt unsettling. I thought it was because the house was over a century old, but it had just been renovated, so I felt better about it. I reminded him that there was a home security alarm, that I always said the neighborhood was safe, and that I had 4 friendly cats with me. He reluctantly left and drove home, and that was when it started happening. I shut all the doors and windows, locked everything, and set the security alarm. Once I got comfortable in bed, the TV started to turn on by itself. We were just using the TV, so I thought I accidentally sat on the remote, but I saw the remote on the nightstand. I quickly turned it off, but just as it went off, it turned back on. I thought it was strange, since the TV had been working perfectly the entire night, but it was even stranger that when the TV turned on by itself, it went to this off channel, like it was just black and white, as if it had no signal. I kept turning it off and it kept turning on. I began to freak out and unplugged the TV entirely. Even though I had had creepy experiences before in this house, this one had never happened before. I told myself that the house was just renovated and maybe there were some wiring issues. Still, I didn't go home and instead slept on the couch. The next day, my boyfriend came over again. I told him about what happened the night before, and he told me that I should have just gone home. I was pretty freaked out, but honestly, it was still not as bad as having to deal with my family. That night, we had dinner together again and watched a movie in the living room. For this next part, I do have to explain the house structure. The house has 2 floors. There's the first floor where you come in through the front door straight into the living room, and the second floor is actually the basement, which is essentially a big living room with another room that can be used as a spare bedroom. The stairs leading downstairs are incredibly creaky and creepy. I don't understand why they didn't fix them during the renovation. As for the cats, they love to be everywhere and anywhere. They all had the personality where they wanted to be around you, but not necessarily held or cuddled. They were all pretty calm cats that liked quieter environments. Of the 4 cats, there was one that was the youngest at around 3 years old, and he was just a bit smaller than the other 3. That night, as we watched the movie, my blood ran cold as I heard sounds from the basement that sounded like an infant crying. My boyfriend froze as he slowly turned to look at me, silently signaling if I heard it too. I remembered from my time working in the animal shelter during my training that sometimes cats sound like babies, especially if they're in duress. As I mentioned earlier, the cats liked to be around people and would follow you around the house, but not close enough to cuddle. I counted and only found 3. The little younger cat was missing. I figured it must be the younger cat and went downstairs to the basement, where I found him stuck in the spare room. He was smaller but more energetic than the other cats. He had somehow closed the door behind him and was stuck in the room all alone. I carried him up the stairs and we resumed the movie. Mid-movie, we paused it because it was time to feed the cats. The owners had a strict feeding schedule for their cats. The cat's food station was in the kitchen, and the kitchen was the only area that connected to the basement. To best explain the layout of the house, the main entrance connects to the living room. The living room then diverges into 2 different sections. One connects to the kitchen, and the other connects to 3 bedrooms, one being the spare bedroom, a master bedroom, and another bedroom that belongs to the family's child. With the living room being connected to the kitchen was the connecting area you had to enter to go to the basement or the living room. For these cats, the only time they didn't want to be around humans was while they were eating and after they ate, as they liked to take naps or rest with their full bellies. They liked to nap in the master bedroom or the teenager's room, as it smelled like their family. They always did this every year that I babysat them, so it wasn't new. It also wasn't unusual to not see them for a little bit after mealtime. We finished our movie and went into the kitchen, which was void of any cats. As we were enjoying dinner, we both once again heard crying noises from the basement. It was naturally louder because we were in the kitchen, which was closer to the basement. I didn't see any cats in the kitchen and didn't think to check the living room because I was panicking internally. My boyfriend was visibly creeped out, and I told him I'd check it out since it was likely the cat again. I couldn't help but notice that the cries sounded a little different from earlier. They were more frequent and higher pitched. I turned on the lights to the basement and slowly crept down the stairs, saying the cat's name with each step. The crying got louder, but when I finally made it down, the crying abruptly stopped. I checked the spare room, any crevices, and under the couch. He was nowhere. At that point, I was feeling so scared and could hear my heartbeat in my head. I don't even go on regular walks. I definitely don't jog, and I absolutely don't run, but I ran up those stairs like my life depended on it. When I got back into the kitchen, I felt my whole body go cold as my heart sank. My boyfriend was standing in the kitchen with a horrid look on his face, surrounded by all 4 cats. He told me that as I went down the stairs to the crying noises, the 4 cats came out at the same time from the area where the bedrooms were. No cat had been downstairs the entire time. I immediately and silently packed up my items, jammed them into my backpack, and we both left the house. For the remaining week, I would only return to the house once a day to clean the litter box and feed them. I know I was going against their eating schedule, but at that point, I really didn't care. After the last day, I locked up, dropped the keys into their hiding spot, thanked them for the opportunity, but said it was my last time and I never returned. I hated that house, and looking back, the experiences I had each year seemed to be escalating. I should have stopped much sooner. I still remember calling my sibling during the drive to my parents' house after the incident. I felt even worse when they revealed that they also had their own experience in that house and kept it from me because they knew I was trying to save money to move out, and they didn't want to scare me. First, I'll start off with descriptions of all those involved. My name is Kelsey. I was 17 years old at the time of this event. I'm 5'3", my friend Haley is 5'8", and my friend Sammy is 5'7". It was March 19th, 2016. I was dog sitting at my mom's friend's house for some extra cash to help me out before going off to college next year. It was a cool spring night, and the people I was dog sitting for had a super cool sunroom where my friends and I liked to smoke. I decided to invite 2 of my friends over to spend the night and make this whole dog sitting thing more fun. Haley and Sammy were a little older, with Haley being 23 and Sammy being 22. They brought over some vodka for us to drink. We hung out for a couple of hours, drinking, smoking, laughing, and catching up. Then we started to get a bunch of phone calls. Now, normally this would not be weird, except for the fact that the phone was supposed to be disconnected. We ignored the first couple of phone calls, thinking they would leave a message or call back in the morning, as it was nearly midnight. The calls were persistent, and we could tell this person was not going to leave us alone until we answered. Sammy decided to answer the phone, and there was a man on the line claiming to have the owner's wallet at a gas station 25 minutes from the house, which did not make sense. This man insisted that we come pick up the wallet now, which we all found extremely odd. After minutes of this man insisting that it was urgent that we come get the wallet, Sammy finally got the man to understand that we were not leaving the house and that we would get it in the morning. We hung up the phone and all felt a weird sensation in our stomachs. We grabbed the dog, Willis, and ran into the back bedroom, shutting all the blinds and locking the door. We already had impaired judgment because of the weed and booze. We talked things out and decided we were just being paranoid and that the man was just trying to make sure we got the wallet back to the owner safely. Hours went by of us drinking and smoking some more, and then we decided to watch a funny movie and make some food to calm down and get ready for bed. That night, we moved from the sunroom to the living room and popped in a DVD. The sunroom is located between the kitchen and living room of the house and the backyard by the pool. The door between the pool and the sunroom does not have a lock on it, but the door between the kitchen, living room, and sunroom does not have a dog door for Willis to go outside to go to the bathroom. So we all agreed that although we were a little spooked by the phone call, we were in a safe neighborhood and that Willis would bark if anything were to come to the door. Time creeped by, and we were laughing on the couches, Haley and I sitting next to each other on one couch and Sammy across the room on the other. The clock struck 3 a.m., and that's when things started to get creepy. Remember earlier how we left the lockable door open to the sunroom so that Willis could get outside to pee? That's where he entered from. I was fully immersed in the comedy, but do you ever get that unexplainable feeling that you're being watched by somebody? That feeling suddenly became overpowering. I turn towards the kitchen and see a dark mass hunched over. I freeze and, for a second, think I'm seeing things. I watch as this mass reaches up into the cabinet, and that's when I realize there's someone in the house. I nudge Haley's side with my elbow and say quietly, "Haley, I think there's somebody in the house." She looks into the kitchen and screams bloody murder. This dark mass then whips his head around and looks directly at me. We make eye contact, and I feel my entire body tense up. All I could see were his piercing blue eyes contrasting against the orange lamp just below the cabinet on the table. Everything else was covered by his black hoodie, pants, shoes, and gloves. He even wore a ski mask that covered up to his nose and mouth. Sammy then gets up to look at what Haley and I are staring at, and somehow musters up the courage to yell, "Get thee out!" He calmly closes the cabinet and slowly walks out the sunroom doors. We immediately got up and rushed to the corner of the room, farthest from where he was crouching, and called 911. They arrived 3 minutes later, searched the entire apartment, take our statements, and sit outside the house for the rest of the night to see if the intruder would come back. The three of us did not stick around long enough to see if he would. We leave our booze, weed, and my car all at the house with the cops and the dog and head home. We come back the next day to find clothes all throughout the house messed with and crumbs by the doggy door. Understandably, Willis wouldn't bark at whoever came in. To this day, we still have no idea who called us or who came into that house. I have not been back. Since I was 28 years old, I've been an animal lover ever since I was a child, which led me to pursue a career path related to animals. I'm a veterinary assistant, but for a while, I also had a little side gig in which I offered house-sitting services for people going away on vacation. This ranged from cats and dogs to bugs and birds. I had actually house-sat entire weekends a few times for people who presumably didn't have any family available to watch their pets. Being a young female who already works at a veterinary hospital, most people weren't intimidated by the idea of me staying in their house while they were gone. I wasn't just some random person off the street. My credentials were all over the internet. One day, I received a response to my ad from a man named Jeremy seeking my services. He had a 20-something-year-old macaw and a cat that he needed to watch for a weekend while he went away. He brought up a price right away and offered me $300 for the entire weekend. I accepted that offer because it was a fair deal. I had experience dealing with birds of all types, including macaws, but this would be my first time watching one for an entire weekend. I met Jeremy at his house. It was a basic, normal corner house in the neighborhood. He was a short man in his late 50s, if I had to guess, with graying hair and a graying mustache. He seemed very friendly. In my experience, most animal lovers are. After meeting Jeremy, I met his bird, Ringo, and his cat, Casper. Ringo was huge. I had handled macaws in the past, which I assumed was part of the reason Jeremy hired me. He told me about Ringo's personality and quirks, and how to get him to quiet down if he made noises. Ringo kept saying, "Daddy's home," as Jeremy would handle him. He laughed and said that's what Ringo says when he sees him. Ringo also said a few other phrases, all of them 2 or 3 word phrases. After showing me how to clean the cage and everything, he gave me a tour of the rest of the house and told me how often to feed Casper. He asked that I not go into any other bedrooms upstairs besides the guest bedroom where I'd be sleeping, which was understandable. There was a bathroom upstairs right next to the bedroom, and he told me I could help myself to his food. However, I'm vegan, so I brought my own food for the weekend. After all of this, and him getting to know me a bit, he gave me the key to the house and left. I watched through the window as he drove off, leaving me alone with Ringo and Casper. It was already late in the day at this point, around 8 p.m., and it was dark out, so there wasn't much left to do that night. Casper was already fed, and Jeremy had left enough food in Ringo's cage for the night. The cage was in the living room, in the center of the house, right next to the TV. I turned on the TV and plopped down on the couch. Casper was hiding somewhere in the house, out of sight, while Ringo just sat in the cage watching me. After a couple of hours of watching TV and eating my little dinner, I went to bed. There was no reason to stay up super late. I slept with the bedroom door open and woke up in the middle of the night to a sound. The best way I could describe it was 2 loud cracking sounds. I sat up and listened for a second, but nothing happened, so I laid back down and went back to sleep. There was a giant bird in a cage downstairs, so hearing sounds was not unexpected. The next day was pretty easy. I cleaned up Casper's litter box, fed him, and fed Ringo. I let Ringo out to play for a couple of hours. He perched on the back of the couch behind me as I watched TV. Jeremy told me that Casper and Ringo typically ignore each other, so I wouldn't have to worry about one attacking the other. Fast forward a few hours, and I left the house to explore the area a little bit. I went for a walk in the park and FaceTimed a couple of my friends. I did a little driving around too, and picked up some food for dinner that night before returning to the house. It was around 7 when I returned, and I interacted with the pets for a couple of hours as I ate my dinner and watched TV. Jeremy was supposed to be returning home late tomorrow. I called it a night early again and went to sleep with the door open. Once again, I woke up to a sound. This time, I believed it was the sound of the bedroom door closing. I looked up and saw that the bedroom door was now closed. While the windows were open, there was little to no wind to create a draft. This was weird. I could also hear sounds from downstairs. It sounded like Ringo moving about in his cage, talking. I got out of bed to check on him and make sure he was okay. As I was walking down the stairs, I heard him talking more clearly. I got to the cage and saw he was wide awake and walking around. I remembered what Jeremy told me to do to get him to quiet down. Hand him a particular treat. I dug into the bag to grab one, but then he said the phrase, "Daddy's home." I found that odd and slightly unsettling. I put a treat in front of Ringo's face, and he grabbed it. This ultimately did end up getting him to stop making noise, but it still felt weird that he was awake in the middle of the night. I went back to the bedroom and left the door open. I fell back asleep, and I kid you not, I woke up once again, maybe a little more than an hour later. This time, I didn't hear what woke me up, but I looked up in the room, dazed, and in the near pitch-black darkness, I saw a black mass in the center of the room moving away from the bed and out the door. I sat up and almost screamed until I fully came to. I now had to wonder if what I just saw was a hallucination or not. I grabbed my phone to turn on the flashlight, but on the screen I saw I had received a text from Jeremy around an hour ago. It was him telling me that if Ringo makes noises in the middle of the night, it's normal and to ignore it. I stared at my screen, rereading the text at least 10 times. That text was sent conveniently around the same time I got up to give Ringo a treat. I felt ill all of a sudden. That black mass in the room I just saw. What if that were real? What if it wasn't a hallucination? I got out of bed and turned on the lamp. I started packing my bag as quickly as possible. I didn't bring many clothes, so I packed very quickly. I quietly went to the bathroom next to grab all my toiletries, then tiptoed back out of the bathroom. I was in the near pitch black upstairs hallway with all the bedroom doors. I looked down the hallway and could swear I heard the faintest sound coming from one of the bedrooms. I don't know why, but this overwhelming curiosity almost hypnotized me, and I crept down the hall to what I presumed was the master bedroom. I put my ear up close to the door and heard a rattling sound. It sounded like a bed rocking. He was in there creeping. I knocked on the door and said, "Jeremy, are you in there?" The rocking sound stopped, and there was now dead silence. I repeated myself, this time saying, "If you're in the house, I need to know right now before I leave." Still silent. I left the house in a hurry, leaving the key on the table, and I didn't look back. On my drive home, I sent him a long voice text saying I was considering reporting this to the authorities as some sort of stalker or breach of privacy situation, and that I was extremely disturbed that he was in the house. He immediately tried calling me 3 times, but I was honestly too scared to pick up. He then sent me a text apologizing and stating that his brother unexpectedly came home that night. I knew it was complete horseshit. I demanded he just pay me, and I wouldn't pursue this any further. He sent me a payment via Zelle, and that was that. I hate to even mention this part, but the next day I realized I was missing a certain article of clothing from my bag that I know for a fact was taken out by him. I have largely chosen to block this memory out. This will be the first and last time I ever write a detailed recounting of this experience. Did you enjoy this content? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Support us with a like and subscribe so our channel can reach more people. Thanks for watching until the end.